Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, and welcome back to the CLAC Conference. I'm Carol Klee from the Department of Spanish and Portuguese Studies at the University of Minnesota. And it's a very special pleasure for me to present to you or introduce Gwendolyn Barnes-Karol to you this morning. I first met Gwen back in 1985 when she was a graduate student member of the search committee that hired me here at the University of Minnesota. So I am eternally grateful. We go back a long time. And even back then, Gwen stood out among her cohort. She was a specialist in early modern Spanish literature, focusing on the interaction between oral and print culture and the development of the Spanish literary canon. But she also had a very, and I'll emphasize that, very, very strong secondary interest in the teaching of second languages and cultures. Her interests in language pedagogy, the use of authentic cultural materials in the classroom, and content-based instruction in foreign languages have remained strong throughout her career and have resulted in a number of important publications that have appeared in the ADFO Bulletin, Foreign Language Annals, Hispania, and edited volumes. Her keen interest in teaching also resulted in her receiving the Ricardo A. Narvaez Award for Excellence in the Teaching of Spanish from the Minnesota chapter of the American Association of Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese. Gwen has been involved in CLAC, or FLAC, as it's known at St. Olaf College, since the late 1980s, when a model program that's still in existence, still going strong, was established at St. Olaf. She regularly teaches the Spanish language component of a course on modern Latin American history. She's taught another on liberation theology, the latter during a study abroad program in Mexico. And she's also been part of a 4-member team from the humanities and social sciences who taught a partial immersion semester of 3 integrated courses entirely in Spanish. She's served as a consultant and mentor for CLAC programs throughout the country, in part through the American Council on Education's program Spreading the Word. Among the colleges she's worked with are Agnes Scott, Colgate University, Drury College, Hartwick College, St. Michael's College, SUNY Oswego, Kalamazoo College, Transylvania University, and of course her alma mater, the University of Minnesota. Currently, she's involved in a U.S. Department of Education undergraduate international studies and foreign language grant at St. Olaf on integrating Asian languages and area studies through content-based instruction. And today, she'll be speaking on the preparation of students for CLAC programs. Her talk is entitled From First and Second Years Foreign Language Instruction to CLAC, a Quantum Leap or a Well-Trodden Path. So please join me in welcoming Gwen.
Thank you, Carol. I have to say before I start to cry here that I wouldn't be here talking about what I'm talking about today if I hadn't had the opportunity to work with Carol and be her research assistant on several projects when I was a graduate student. Okay. I'm going to start today with a story and take you back in time to May 30th, 1989, when a group of some 20 St. Olaf faculty members, half from foreign languages and half from other disciplines, gathered in a hot, stuffy classroom in our former foreign language building on campus, Old Main. We were there to take the first step in making our newly NEH-funded project, Foreign Languages in the Disciplines, a program of curriculum integration, a reality. As we munched on donuts and drank coffee, some colleagues from departments outside of foreign languages glowed as they enthusiastically talked about how this project would help them realize their dream of having their students, undergraduate students that is, read scholarly articles in the original language, just like they did. More than one of us foreign language faculty members almost choked when we heard such comments. What was that? Students read scholarly articles in French, German, or Spanish? Are our colleagues crazy? How can they read secondary sources when they haven't yet mastered the passé composé versus the imparfait in French, cases in German, or the imperfect subjunctive in Spanish. My goodness. And the vocabulary gap. How can they understand learned commentary on the Mexican Constitution of 1917 if they haven't yet become adept at competently explaining their medical symptoms to a hypothetical doctor from the target language that, after all, they were supposed to have learned and mastered that back in Chapter 8? Oh my goodness, this is going to be a long workshop. The temperature in the room rose as two very different pedagogical cultures came face to face with different but complementary hopes, goals, and realities. It was soon clear that our students would maybe have to make a quantum leap to bridge the gap between what they were doing in their first and second year foreign language classes and what they might be called on to do in our still hypothetical applied foreign language components. Weekly discussion sessions based on foreign language readings led by those of us in foreign languages and attached to core courses taught by our colleagues in other fields in English. Obviously, the heat generated by our thoughtful discussions in the summer of '89 did not cause Old Main to erupt in flames, create permanent enmity between colleagues, or cause us to abandon the project. I wouldn't be here this morning if that had been the case, nor would my colleagues Jolene Bargeste, Dolores Peters, and Irina Walter, who were all part of that original 1898. Okay, we were pioneers, but not that far back in the past. The 1989 group, and who are presenting or have presented at this conference. So what was behind this gap that would require something akin to a quantum leap on the part of our students? What I'm going to do this morning first is deconstruct the Spanish curriculum in place at the time and make a retrospective comparison of what we were doing in Spanish through the 5th semester of language study, which at that time was the prerequisite for entry into FLAC, and what colleagues in other disciplines were doing in their courses. But it's only fair that in 1989, our own foreign language students also had to make a quantum leap to go from our foreign language sequence to our upper division literature courses. And to be honest, this chasm that our students needed to jump over some 20 years ago still exists in many foreign language programs in the U.S. today. The MLA's 2007 report, Foreign Languages in Higher Education, New Structures for a Changed World, challenges the still pervasive so-called two-tiered structure that separates a language curriculum on one hand from a content curriculum, which is literature in most foreign language departments, on the other hand, keeping them on parallel but unequal tracks that never connect. In its place, the MLA recommends, and I quote, a broader and more coherent curriculum in which language, culture, and literature are taught as a continuous whole, supported by alliances with other departments and expressed through interdisciplinary courses. FLAC. So as I retell the story of Spanish, I'll be outlining one approach to bridge the gap between these two tiers of instruction in foreign language departments that has implications both for CLAC courses and for our teaching at the upper division in foreign language departments. So let's go back to 1989. Most of our colleagues from other departments taught their courses primarily as lecture courses. Out-of-class work focused heavily on reading, with mastery of content demonstrated primarily through writing, essay exams, or term papers. As I outline the features of our Spanish curriculum from back then, I'll have a series of slides you'll see in which on the left side there'll be some notes about the features of our language curriculum, and on the right side some general comments about the features of courses from other disciplines in our workshop group. In first and second year Spanish classes, the curriculum was simply a function of the textbooks we chose. In other words, the textbook was the curriculum. Our goal was to cover the material and finish the book. Our first year program featured a textbook organized around a grammatical syllabus, highlighting vocabulary related to various facets of daily life, with communicative activities designed to practice verb forms and other grammar rules. As students progress through the textbook, they learn to ask and answer simple self-referential questions about their lives and activities, and complete simple transactions relating to survival needs and travel. In short, the textbook was designed to set students on the path of gaining some type of colloquial fluency as defined by the then provisional ACTFL guidelines, hoping to move our students from the novice to the intermediate level. Our third semester course was an extensive grammar review whose goal was to help students consolidate their control of grammar rules and verb forms. If they hadn't gotten it in the first year, we were going to pound it into their heads in that third semester, and they'd leave mastering the grammar. Fourth semester Spanish was a course that explored U.S. Hispanics through short stories by Hispanic writers and author-generated short readings from a textbook about the Hispanic heritage of the U.S. from the founding of St. Augustine, Florida in 1565 to profiles of notable 20th century Hispanic leaders and celebrities. That was better than grammar. Fifth semester Spanish, the first course that counted for the major and initially the prerequisite for FLAC, was Spanish Culture and Civilization, based again on a textbook that provided cultural facts in a chronological framework. And I've been forgetting to advance some slides here. Evaluation in those days, we called it testing, tested the bits and pieces of language and students' ability to carry out simulated real-world tasks in speaking in the first 3 semesters, with some factual knowledge in 4th and 5th semesters. There was reading in our curriculum. The reading done in the first 3 years of our curriculum, or first 3 semesters of our curriculum, presented a major contrast with the type of reading done in a disciplinary context, whether in literature, our own field, or the humanities or social sciences fields of our colleagues. In the first 3 semesters of Spanish, students primarily read short passages written by textbook authors who used language and grammar students had already been exposed to, but in novel combinations. New words and occasional unfamiliar grammar items needed to convey information were highly glossed in margins. Comprehension questions checked whether or not students understood the passage's main points and some details. The only authentic texts or primary sources were realia, bus schedules, restaurant menus, advertisements for hotels, and so forth, that provided information to be used in oral activities or sometimes just served as decorative items placed on pages to fill up the white space in the textbook. In the 3rd and 4th semester, some longer passages, still author-generated, were often stimuli for oral production. In other words, especially in our 3rd semester course, they were a collection of miscellaneous readings to get people to talk in class. For example, we have to practice the subjunctive. So, students read pieces on topics such as, is television a good or bad influence on children in the United States? Okay. Why? Because people have opinions about TV, and they can talk about their own opinions and use the subjunctive. The reading itself wasn't really important or particularly interesting. It served as a conversation starter and a source of vocabulary so that students could speak Spanish and practice their subjunctive in sharing their own views on TV. And you can imagine talking in class turned out to be, oh, my favorite TV show, do you like that one? No, I don't like that one. Have you seen? Yes. Not too much subjunctive, but lots of talk about TV. Okay. Even abridged and edited selections students read from Spanish language periodicals in the books had essentially the same function, to suggest a topic that students could run with without a lot of consideration of the perspective expressed in the text itself. And if it was written primarily to showcase vocabulary and grammar, maybe it didn't have a lot of perspective. In our 4th and 5th semesters, Students had ample practice reading to learn, okay? That is, reading to learn information. So our students were doing a lot of reading, but as a means of stimulating oral production or maybe learning some facts. In the other classes, history, anthropology, sociology, etc., students were reading for meaning within a disciplinary context. Happily, at this first workshop, we were able to bring our two pedagogical cultures together, and by the end, had come to a felicitous compromise. Students wouldn't read scholarly articles in the original language, but they would read a series of very carefully selected primary sources, preferably not ones readily available through English translation, chosen by the pairs of faculty who would work together. And for those of you who had the opportunity to listen to Jolene Barjaste and Dolores Peters yesterday afternoon, you saw a nice commentary on the development of text and selection. Drawing from research into second language reading, foreign language faculty, in preparation for our sessions, would, first of all, prepare extensive reading guides for each text with pre-reading activities designed to activate students' prior knowledge of the topic and establish links with the context created by the English language core course. 2, help them attend to the genre, structure, language, and rhetorical features of each text in reading activities to help them plow through the text. And then 3, in the discussion, focus on post-reading activities to highlight the meaning and importance of the text and its value as an illustration of a theme from the main core course. Oops. Okay. By the end of the 2-year period, we had offered 7 FLAC courses involving 7 different pairs of faculty, and the results of our collaboration had gone way beyond original expectations. Okay. One of the things we had to start doing early on was thinking about our students and not just about texts and materials. And for a moment, I'm just going to leave this lovely scenic photo up for us to contemplate a little bit as I continue to talk a little bit about what we were doing in our curriculum. So we're going to take a scenic voyage to the Andes, keep this in the back of our minds, and I'm going to continue to talk a little bit about the development of our program. The establishment of our program was quickly having a washback effect on our foreign language programs, because we saw firsthand what our students could do with primary sources in the target language, even ones with grammar features beyond their control when speaking or writing. When, first of all, the English language course provided deep contextualization for reading in another language, and 2, the foreign language instructor helped learners process the source with these carefully designed pre-reading, reading, and post-reading activities. Our FLAC experience made us aware of the untapped potential of our students from a new perspective. It didn't take long before faculty in Spanish involved in the program started revamping our foreign language courses. Faculty in French did the same, as those of you who heard yesterday's talk by Jolene and Dolores. As we started changing our curriculum, we always had to keep in mind who were our students in our foreign language classes and what are they thinking. So I'm going to have us contemplate this photograph a little bit and think about what students in a foreign language class might think about this photograph. Okay. In a foreign language class, once again, we were dealing with students who were primarily used to foreign languages to talk about their own lives and daily travel or survival needs in the foreign language. So as we were developing our curriculum, we always had to keep in mind our students. Who are our students? For a moment, we're just going to try to go into the mindset of our students and think about who these students were. This is a photograph. My colleague Maggie Broner from Spanish, who I work with on a daily basis and I often do diagnostic activities where we ask students to describe a photograph just to see where they are in terms of language and in terms of their thinking. Our students now aren't so different from the students we had 20 years ago. How do students typically respond when they come into the hypothetical context or the real context of a third semester Spanish course? And I'm mentioning third semester because many of our curricular reforms started with third semester. So our students today are not so different from our students back then. Students coming into third semester today come directly from high school. How do our students typically respond when we ask them to describe a photograph like this? They begin by pointing out the objects in the photo. Ah, there's a llama, a tree, a big hill, and some mountains and some clouds. Then they start to weave in colors. There's a brown llama, a big green hill, and some white clouds in the blue sky. If they've ever seen a llama, they might recount their personal experiences with a llama. The day I fed a llama at the corn maze in Shakopee when I was 10 years old. For those of you from Minnesota, you might know what I'm talking about. If they recognize the big green hill on the background, Machu Picchu, they might share with what they remember about the Incas from high school. Or maybe they'll share what they remember about the Aztecs or the Mayas, as the three of them kind of get confused in their minds. Okay. If they're really at a loss, they make up a story about the llama. This is my pet llama. His name is Pedro. He's brown. Silence. Oh, I have a dog too. Pedro the llama and the dog are really good friends. Okay. So keeping in mind, we were dealing with students who were coming from a mindset where language was learning everyday language and talking about their lives. We had to keep this mindset in our minds as we did curriculum reform. Okay, so as we continue on, we'll think about the student who talks about the llama in his or her personal life. So as we changed our curriculum, we first started kind of on an ad hoc basis, to tell the truth. We supplemented the author-generated readings in our Culture and Civilization textbook in 5th semester Spanish with primary texts and wrote reading guides to help students process them, very much like we were doing for our FLAC courses. We ditched the 3rd semester grammar course really quickly. And we replaced it with an exploration of some cultural themes in contemporary Spain and Latin America using a textbook with author-generated readings, which is the best we had at that time. But now reading in that 3rd semester course would lead more naturally into the reading in the 4th semester course about U.S. Hispanics. And reading would now take precedence in the curriculum. But not just reading to learn comprehension, or reading to learn vocabulary, or reading to learn something about the llama, but reading that would be critical reading focusing on analyzing texts, okay, and their perspectives, and not just students' own views or experiences with the topics of the text. When we located appropriate authentic materials to supplement textbook readings, we added them to the curriculum with the goal of eventually replacing textbooks with a set of readings written by native speakers for native speakers, accompanied by activities we wrote to integrate language learning and practice into a content framework. And that's what we have now. It took us about 10 years to get there. Okay. Hopefully it won't take you 10 years if you start making some changes in curriculum, because this room is filled with expertise of people who have examples to show, and you can start from our collective experience instead of from scratch. Class time would still be devoted primarily to speaking, but oral activities would focus on analyzing and responding to texts that express views of Spanish speakers rather than talking about one's own experience about the topics in texts. Students, through their still developing learner language, would engage in activities cognitively challenging to college students, more challenging than talking about the llama named Pedro, but we would have to equip them linguistically to do this. does this second year curriculum, which we've developed, like I said, over a period of years, provide a well-trodden path to FLAC now? Well, I'm not still sure if it's well-trodden, but the quantum leap that we faced in 1989 has definitely been replaced by a nice pedestrian bridge over the abyss. And although we didn't set out to do so, as we applied the lessons we learned from FLAC to our language courses, we greatly improved articulation with the FLAC courses. In fact, after just a couple of years, our students were able to go into FLAC after the 4th semester of language study and not after the 5th. At the same time, what we did in changing our second year language curriculum based on lessons learned from FLAC that facilitated articulation into FLAC also facilitated articulation into our upper division. So we went from FLAC to changing our language curriculum to support FLAC, but we ended up supporting the work that our students do in our own department as much as supporting what students do in FLAC. So right now we're going to take some examples from our 3rd semester course at St. Olaf, which, although it's listed as Immediate Spanish 1 still in the class and lab, is really now called Intercultural Connections, the U.S. and the Spanish-speaking world in a global community. Most students in this course come directly to us from high school programs and are placed there through our in-house placement exam. No two students come with the same preparation, but they all come to class with the same language learning mindset that we saw in how students in the past and present talk about the photo of the llama. Class is about naming objects, using our daily language, saying anything we might know that we remember from high school, and if we're out of things to talk about, we make up a story. Okay. So what we first have to do before we start teaching in a new way is socializing our students into a new mentality. They come to us with the llama story in what we call a language learning mindset. Okay. So if we're going to change their mindset where they're going to do critical analysis of text, what does that mean? I think it's helpful to think of what undergraduate students who would look at the photo of the llama from a disciplinary perspective might be able to teach us. And I have a real quote from an anthropology student who took a look at this photo. I asked the student to provide me for just a short commentary on what this photo could communicate to him as a student of anthropology. Okay? Nothing having to do with the Spanish language. And I will quote from the student's response. From looking at this photo, it can be assumed that the llama was used to carry goods from the hay on its body, or simply for transportation. The Inca site of Machu Picchu shows the remains of a great civilization that may have used the high mountainous region for militaristic advantage or simply for isolation. The site offers an archaeologist's dream, for it is in great standing and only slightly damaged with years of history lying within its confines. A little different from "This is Pedro." Why the difference in these comments? Obviously, there's a difference in language. The student of anthropology speaking in English can say things that the students in Spanish cannot say. But language isn't all of it, and we can teach the language, and our students by the end of the 3rd semester can say something more in line with what the anthropology student has said than "This is Pedro the llama." But mindset is another factor. This anthropology student looked at the text through the lens of anthropology. But once again, our students coming into 3rd semester Spanish do not look at a photo or a text through the lens of any disciplinary framework. They look at it through a language learning mindset. Words, vocabulary, stories. So let's go into a little bit more what I mean by an analytical mindset. And for this, I decided to look into one of the disciplines that we work with frequently at St. Olaf and see what another discipline says. The American Historical Association, yes, has an interesting statement on excellent classroom teaching of history on its website that I'd suggest is very helpful for all of us to read. And it has several key elements which I think are very helpful for us in terms of thinking about how to make second year language instruction, which is where we started and where maybe many of us want to start, more like courses that have a disciplinary perspective. Some of the ideas that caught my attention in terms of the content dimension on this statement, the statement that historical facts are the beginning of teaching history, not the final goal. Once again, words, verbs are the beginning of teaching Spanish, but necessarily not the final goal. And that in an excellent history class, teachers need to present analytical concepts characteristic of historical study, so that students become acquainted with historical thinking. Okay? Courses should provide students with multiple opportunities to do the work of the historian, which is to become aware of sources used, become adept at extracting meaning, comparing findings from one text with other evidence, formulating conclusions, and testing these ideas against additional evidence in the eyes of other historians. In short, they should practice the art of interpretation. Actually, this is what we do in our upper level foreign language classes, isn't it? And I think most of us out there, depending on our discipline, can say we do something very, very similar in our college level work. Why not start this in the language sequence? Okay. Evaluation has to be taken into consideration, and evaluation should let students display that they've learned historical thinking and that they can do what historians do. And if we go back again and look at historical thinking, why not bring historical thinking into the language class, but analytical thinking, with the idea of reading texts, multiple texts, comparing evidence from sources, and talking about those texts, not just the topics. So that's what we've tried to do in our second year curriculum at St. Olaf. And what we're going to do now is see how we get into this, because what we have to do, once again, is begin socializing our students into an analytical mindset and not just the language learning mindset. This is the first text students encounter when they start our third semester course. It's called United States. At first glance, it looks really easy. It's about the United States. Okay. Why? Students already know the information it contains. They know what the capital is. They know the names of the big rivers. Everything looks familiar. Okay. They could answer questions about the United States in class in Spanish without having to do any homework at all. And there are lots of pictures. You really don't even have to read it, do you, if they're pictures? I mean, you just ignore the pictures, and you maybe don't even have to do your homework. Some students, when they see this, think, oh my goodness, we're placed too low. We have to get out of this course. Our job then, as we try to help our students go from a language learning mindset, to an analytical mindset, is to problematize even such an apparently easy text so that students can focus on analyzing content in a cognitive, challenging way and learning the language needed to do so. As they work through a series of activities, we model an approach to help them think critically about the text. Okay. As we do this, we're trying to help students understand that their previous language class may have focused on learning what's called a new primary discourse in Spanish. And to use some language from James Paul Gee, the primary discourse is our culturally specific vernacular language, our everyday language. The language in which we speak and act is everyday, non-specialized people. This is the language that's based in the home, the family, and the community. But as we as children start going to school, and then continuing throughout high school and post-secondary education, we're learning a variety of secondary discourses. Varieties of language that come from a more public sphere than our initial socializing group, the home and family, usually within institutions that are part and parcel of wider communities, religious groups, community organizations, schools, businesses, or governments. Okay. So students come in to third semester Spanish with roughly an equivalent of the primary discourse they have in English in Spanish from their previous study, the language of the home that makes us everyday people. Okay? And this is important. To be proficient in a language, we need to be able to function as everyday people. But it isn't sufficient for analyzing texts, even a text as apparently easy as United States. Students need academic language, which is one type of secondary discourse. It's a special type of secondary discourse. Zwiers, in an interesting book about building academic language, defines academic language in a way that I think is helpful for us. The set of words, grammar, and organizational strategies used to describe complex higher-order thinking processes and abstract concepts. But our students don't come to us with this language. Okay. To think a little bit more in our own languages, starting from the language of the family, which is the base, and which is not on the screen, students first learn general-purpose academic language. I put a clipboard here to signify that. And then they learn discipline-specific academic language relating to Zwiers' 4 categories of language about math, science language, social science language, and language about literature. Each of these categories overlaps and constantly expands over people's educational experiences. Okay. In second-year Spanish, then, to analyze even the first text, the United States, they need academic language. And for our purposes, we're defining academic language in our second-year program in terms of language that allows students to deal with abstractions, ideas, and concepts not embedded in their lives as everyday people, language for higher-order thinking skills, and linked to evidence from sources, not just students' own opinions on topics, but language relating to talking about evidence from sources, registers appropriate for speaking to or writing for unfamiliar persons in a variety of contexts, and a little bit of vocabulary, kind of general discipline-specific vocabulary. Okay. So when we go back to the United States, we're going to try to get students to start thinking analytically and start introducing some of the academic language that they need to deal with this apparently very easy text. But before they even see the text, we assign them to bring a picture to class that they think represents the United States. We start out doing an activity using their everyday language. They bring a picture, we do some type of show and tell activity, they talk about their pictures, we categorize pictures, and usually class ends with a large group debriefing with a wall full of photographs of the United States and slogans that encapsulate the essence of the United States. And typically these are, in Spanish of course, United States, diversity, or United States, land of liberty and opportunities, or sometimes United States, where money talks. So when students first see the reading again, it's already a text in dialogue with their own views. Okay. But even though it looks easy to read, it's really not something we're reading for content anymore. It's a text to be read as one view of the United States from the Spanish-speaking world and as one piece of evidence to be compared and contrasted with other pieces of evidence. And as soon as they see the second page and they see the slogan that the author has created, United States, the giant of the North, we start having some really interesting discussions. And suddenly the pictures take on new relevance. There's a lot of giant things, a huge statue, a huge bridge, a huge system of highways in Los Angeles. On the other page, there are some really huge football players. Isn't baseball the American sport? But we've got some huge baseball players. We have some huge towers. This predates 9/11. We have a huge river. We have synonyms for giant, huge, abundant, colossal, etc., etc., etc. And working very slowly through this text, we do a variety of different analytical texts with very basic templates of academic language. So I've just got some examples. All these things we'd be doing in Spanish. We facilitate some key verbs, a few phrases, and we work through analyzing the language of the text in simple fashion through their learner language with a few bits of academic language, analyzing the images and layout, interpreting the overall message and perspective of the author, and ending up with their own reactions. Okay? So we're analyzing the text, but we're also a language class, and if they're going to react, they need some subjunctive. So we build in a place to introduce, to teach everything from the conjugations and one use to practicing verbs, but we've done it within a natural context. They want to say something about this text. They have a need to express ideas. They've seen false facts. They doubt some of the impressions. There's a real world reason to use the subjunctive. We teach one use in a very limited set of activities, and it means something. So we go from analyzing a text, trying to model a method we're going to use throughout the semester, but we also do some focus on form. Okay? We're content-based, but we're content-based with attention to intentional language teaching and use for very specific features and functions. Okay. What I've been talking about is just one way to think about how to avoid the quantum leap between a foreign language sequence that has, in the past for us, had an overuse of everyday language, and now, as you can see, we've moved into something that we're talking about text, analyzing text, and developing critical thinking skills through learner language and learning academic language. Okay. This is just one way, and we're going to have the exciting opportunity in this afternoon's plenary to hear from a group of faculty from Minnesota that are going to present another way. Okay. This is a place that there's room for multiple ways of reconfiguring courses and programs to fit one's own institutional context. But you've probably noticed I haven't talked much about first year. Okay? And I'm not going to talk a lot about it today. But I am going to bring up one concept that I think can be helpful for us. Because for many reasons, first-year language programs still need to deal with everyday language. But we have multiple opportunities, if we look at them, to do something that Guy calls filtering academic language. Filtering academic language into the lower level. To understand this concept of filtering, let's go back to primary discourses. All of you who are parents have been filtering language, the secondary discourse of academic language, to your children along the way as you read books with children. Talk about books and help them talk about how the books they read connect up with their real life. You may also have encouraged certain types of storytelling skills in your children, helping them produce longer, more complex, or more orderly narratives by cueing them to provide details or a chronology, for instance, something that paves the way for expository reporting tasks that they'll use in school. So I'm just going to give one quick example of how we might think about filtering something that's academic language and more analytical into a first-year program that still focuses on everyday language. Let's take the exciting topic of colors. Colors are in every first-year book, and I think people need to know about colors. Okay? How do we teach colors? Usually with clothing vocabulary. And we practice colors of the clothes worn by people in textbooks or the people in class. Although anymore they all wear blue jeans and drab t-shirts, so there's not a lot of color practice. Then we usually simulate shopping. I'd like a blue blouse, please. I'm sorry, miss, we don't have it in blue. How about yellow? No, I don't like yellow. I prefer green, etc., etc. But why stop here? Shopping is no longer limited to purchases in a bricks and mortar establishment. Furthermore, the products of international firms are often available locally, or there are international firms that may manufacture the products they produce in our home cities or states. So even with something as basic about colors, why stop at clothing? Let's take it further. I just went on the internet and tried to look for colorful corporate logos from Spain. I don't know if I've got all the colors, okay, but all the colors in our textbook. We've got corporate logos that represent companies that have a presence in the United States, if not in Minnesota, through products that they sell or products that are manufactured in the United States. Even with something as simple as this, with a very simple template that would involve teaching them a couple new words in Spanish, students could start thinking about these logos. Based on the logo, I think that Nenuco, for example, sells or produces, what? There's a little pastel blue bear and pink. What could they produce? Okay. Using a very simple template, we can do something with colors that's a little more interesting than clothing. And this opens the possibility to have students later go after class, go on the internet, see what presence these companies have in the United States or in Minnesota, and it opens up an opening for looking at globalization, not from the perspective of the United States going abroad, but other countries with a presence in the United States that we may not use in first-year language, but in second-year language we can pick up on something for which the seeds have been planted in the first year. Okay. So to end up today, we've told our story. Each institution has its own story, and many of you are going to be creating new stories, hopefully after this conference. As you work ahead within your own institutional context, I have 3 suggestions in terms of thinking about how to reduce what sometimes is a quantum leap between the language learning sequence and CLAC courses. First of all, the importance of creating an analytical mindset in students to replace their language learning mindset. Second, the importance of anchoring content in analysis of authentic texts, which involves using higher order thinking skills and learning academic language. And then teaching intentionally or filtering academic language so that students can analyze through their still developing learner language phenomena and texts that are cognitively challenging for them. So thank you very much this morning, and I wish you all wonderful travels down the path towards CLAC in the future. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Answer some questions?
Yes.
Any questions, response? Yes.
Thank you very much, Gwen. That was amazing. I would like to ask you if you have some data showing how learner language develops over the course of that 3rd semester.
We have data. Did you bring any, Maggie? Oh, the question was, do we have any data showing how students progress over this 3rd semester course? And we do. I didn't bring any. Maggie, did you bring some?
Yes, but we would have to set it up.
Yeah, we do have data. We've been collecting data, both oral and written data, and we're working to have that data be able to come out in a public fashion in the future, hopefully the nearer future. But yes, we're looking at data, we're analyzing data. Anecdotally, we've done some exercises where we start out with a diagnostic photo, not Pedro the Llama, but another one. We've got some data where we start out with a photo at the beginning of the course, just telling students to talk about the picture in light of what they know in the Spanish-speaking world. And then we've used the same photo at the end of the semester with the same task. Talk about the photo in light of what you know about the Spanish-speaking world, with no preparation or anything. And we've compared samples. No matter what students' level of proficiency or achievement, there's noticeable differences. Okay? And there are various types. There's differences in vocabulary. They pick up vocabulary It's not just Pedro del Ama. It might be isolation, as the anthropology student mentioned. It might be mountains as geographical barriers, mountains as cultural barriers. They pick up vocabulary. What we notice is sentences, longer sentences, multiple clauses. Because as we do these activities, and our students kind of get sick of us, we're always saying, why? If they make a simple declarative sentence, I think this company sells baby products. ¿Por qué? Why? ¿Por qué? Why? We're constantly why? We're working on multi-clausal sentences, and when you need subjunctive and when you don't. We see longer clauses. At the end of the course, we don't see any, this is the llama, his name is Pedro. Okay, we don't see anything like that. We see differences. Of course. We see more variety of verbs. At the beginning, we might see the verb I. There is, lots of, there is this, there is that. We see verbs that help enumerate. Later we say, this is something. I think that, or this seems to show that, or this illustrates that. We see a lot of verbs illustrating, pointing out, indicating, etc., etc. We see different information. We see that students see more in the picture. They literally see more than objects. They see the pictures more like the anthropology student does. We're not anthropologists. We're not social scientists. We're linguists, folks from literature. But we ask students to think more. And then we try to give them the language to think, and we're seeing differences that are noticeable over one semester. And then they continue on to the fourth semester and beyond. Sorry for a long answer. Phyllis?
Gwen, I have a question about how you change the mindset of the faculty. Because,
very good question.
You have a very provocative and innovative approach, and not all of the people that we have on our departments and our campuses are willing to give up the 19th century bilingual lists and grammar translation activities. How do you move the faculty forward?
We have the advantage, like I said, I mentioned the names of several people who are from the original group who are still around. Well, a lot of the people from the original group are still at St. Olaf. Not all could be together. We had the advantage of having a group experience. There's a core group of people. We taught ourselves, and we worked through these things ourselves, and even our departmental members who weren't part of the initial FLAC group, through the 90s, everyone who was tenured or tenure track in at least Romance languages, French and Spanish at St. Olaf, they were all involved in FLAC. Okay, not all the people on term contracts, but all tenured and tenure track. So we did it along the way, and it wasn't always easy. When I said we ditched the third semester grammar course, that was a really tough decision and discussion in our department because once again, some people weren't comfortable doing that. And at one point we talked about, well, there were other things going on at St. Olaf. We went from, when we started the FLAC program, we had a 3-semester foreign language requirement. Then we had a curricular change approved college-wide in 1994 where we went to a 4-semester requirement in French, German, and Spanish, and 3 in the lictals, and there's the whole story behind that I won't tell. But we had other things going on in terms of thinking about language. And when we ditched that third semester course, that was one of the toughest discussions in Spanish because people were really worried about the major people, the students going the major. Would they not have the grammar? And we thought about having 2 tracks when we still had the 3-semester language track or requirement. One track was going to be third semester was grammar, and the other track was third semester was culture, which is where we started and what's given us what we have today. And the grammar was going to be people who are going to major in Spanish, and the culture was people who are going to quit with the third semester. And I thought, oh my goodness, we're not going to have any majors. If we send the majors to 1 semester of hardcore grammar, there's going to be nobody left. But maybe culture will want to make these students become majors. They're going to head to the major. They won't have had grammar. The majors or the prospective majors are going to fall by the wayside, and whoops, that's not going to be good. And obviously we went for the culture route. We decided we had to think very hard, what grammar do you need? And as people were becoming much more aware of language learning as a developmental process, and the fact that learning the rules and knowing rules doesn't mean you can control the use of them in application, either partially or totally, as we educated ourselves and became more conversant, we realized, okay, forget it, we don't need this third semester grammar course. Grammar is not a destination, it's part of the journey that accompanies us. And so after that, we started creating goals, language goals, grammar goals, culture goals, thinking goals for the different semesters in our program, and we realized we didn't even have to worry about some of the grammar things at all in the language sequence, and even at upper level. We started not talking about grammar per se, but we started talking about discourse, about registers, about academic language, not just grammar rules. Okay, but it was tough. Okay, so we did it. We had a group experience, not without some discussion. Now when we get new people, we socialize them into our way of working. And if they don't like it, I guess they leave, St. Olaf. But I think there has to, no, I'm just teasing. I'm teasing. No, they don't like it. They don't leave. They come. But yeah, I mean, these are real things. There has to be ownership. You have to build from a base of something that's common. Okay? There has to be buy-in. There has to be willing to look at other things. And that's really tough. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to do the same thing. Even now I'm talking about our curriculum. We have an approach, but there's still enough leeway that people can work with their own talents and their own ideas, and we're constantly working as a group. In our third semester course, we meet weekly to touch base, to talk what we're doing. How are you doing it? How am I doing it? You got a good idea. At the end of each semester, at the end of each year, we have a debriefing. We say, what's going well? What do we need to junk? What do we need to change? What can we do to improve things? Is this working or not? There has to be will and there has to be interest. And I think one thing that does help is when there is data that shows, and there's data not from our study, but there's other data in the field, and some of the linguists here can cite sources much better than I can. There's data that shows that learning through a content framework does not mean your grammar is worse than learning through a grammar framework, and it may be better. Okay? And when people start to see data, we all work from our past experiences, what we experienced as students, what we experienced as faculty. But if people can see data, I think it helps. It helps. It's not just anecdotal. It's not, oh, this works for me. No, there's data in the field, and I think that helps. But it's got to be, I think it has to develop over time in a series of discussions, and it has to be something where everybody has something to contribute, and everybody has something from their experience that can be valued. You can't start out, well, we've got the right answer and you guys are wrong, and there's nothing that you do that's appropriate. I think we all have to look at, we're all there to do something, and we all bring something. And let's see how we can, as a group, educate ourselves and all contribute something. That sounds kind of idealistic, but I think it's got to be built from the bottom up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.